So now we are going to move to the North American Hub, and we've got Dr. Greg Heitsusen. He is the Assistant Professor of Professional Practice of Religion, Ecology, and Sustainability in the School of Environment and Natural Resources at The Ohio State University in Columbus, Ohio. Welcome, Dr. Heitsusen.
Thank you, Leilani, and thank you to everyone else here who's listening and those who are reporting out. I see a lot of overlap between the things that we talked about in the North American Hub and some of the great points that I've just heard from my colleagues here from around the world. And I think I can say that I share the delight that many of us had in the North American Hub at having this conversation yesterday. We had fantastic conversations. We had about 130 participants who had registered for the North American Hub. And I think the setting of the table with the sentiments from the world's religious leaders and the presentations from the Global Hub yesterday really put us in a good space to talk about these important issues. We had really rich discussions, and there were a number of things where old friends were reconnecting by finding each other's in these conversations and networks. So it's been a great experience, and I'm honored to be able to present some of the summary of the things that we talked about in the North American Hub. Regarding the historical role of faith-based organizations for sustainable development, we had a number of thoughts. Faith communities, it seems to us, at least in the North American context, have gone from being mostly not engaged in environmental questions to being leaders at many scales in responding to environmental issues. Our faith communities have been historically good at education, we think, and we've been leaders in disaster response. And we're continuing to take action, but we're also increasing our capacity to respond as we need to, as disasters increase. But we're starting to lean in more to affecting policy at this point. If we look at how faith communities have played an essential role in social change and social justice historically in North America, in the abolition of slavery, civil rights movement, women's rights, and a whole host of other issues, we can see how pivotal faith communities have been in social change, and we can embrace that role now as our society needs us to play that role now as much as ever. Also regarding the historical role, it's not just our teachings, but historical practices embedded in our traditions that center sustainable development through connecting individual action in the self to the earth and creation. And I think if we think of ourselves as part of creation, then we're less likely to do harm to creation. We also talked about the long tradition of foreign missions, and that in more recent years, it's become more focused on environmental issues. And in particular, someone mentioned that Christianity has taken on language regarding the earth that's gone from dominion over to stewardship of, and that's a good development. We also said that religions in varied social locations have different responsibilities and complicities. And many faith-based organizations have been first responders to disasters. We are now transitioning to new forms of care. And I think the term care brings in the sense that we really do care from the depth of our heart, and that's an important motivator. Our local tangible projects are really important. As is being in community with the whole of nature. In terms of the question of how faith mobilizes action, some of our main takeaway points there included that the faith community has moral sway. We have multi-generational people power as storytellers, which I heard one of the other groups say, as frontline responders, as advocates. And we also have financial institutions that can divest and invest in different ways. Another comment about how faith mobilizes action was that the depth of understanding of love and hope conveyed by faith can spur people to enduring action. We also noted that faith without action is corrupt, and faith in all its forms is widely inclusive. Faith also empowers people through connections with local faith communities, local churches. Faith acts from the heart, and it has the ability to reach globally. We also noted that one of the ways we mobilize action is by preaching against injustice and immorality in all its forms. Faith community should not forget to preach the truth. Our values motivate us to address injustice, to act as stewards, caretakers, and peacemakers. The faith community mobilizes action through healing our thinking. That's both our hearts and our minds, as well as molding the minds of children to perceive their religious duties not only include serving and loving God, but also serving, loving, and caring for all of God's creations. We also noted the ability of faith organizations and of people of faith to be connectors and organizers. And we noted that faith offers guidelines on how to deal with loss of the environment and offers pastoral care for the broken hearts and broken relationships. Many times I think we realize there's a lot of grief involved in dealing with environmental issues, and faith communities are able to speak to that and help people move forward. Faith community has the voice of moral accountability and connections with communities on the ground. These were two really important points that we discussed in the North American Hub, being the voice, the moral voice for the current situation on the planet. And we have communities that can do something about it. And the faith community is a trusted messenger that can use its extensive resources for good. As to how the contribution of faith and faith-based organizations differentiates from the contribution of other actors, such as government or civil society and business, we noted indigenous and faith traditions promote giving, not taking, integrated with one's life. And we also look to the big picture, not just to election cycles or short-term quarterly business cycles. We have more of an eternal timeline or a cyclical timeline. We also have the power to tell positive, moral, and principled stories. The theme of the narrative and the stories as a way to communicate important things continues to come up. We also said that faith-based community engagement offers tools to influence governments and policies, and we've certainly seen increasing engagement of faith communities all around the world in some of the more important policy issues related to sustainability. Another point was, and this was something that I think really reached to the heart of our sense in the North American Hub of where, as faith communities, we have something in particular to add. With the practices of ceremony and prayer and contemplation and ritual, we said the faith-based community connects with spirit and emotions and facilitates practices of repentance and lament. And thus, we particularly contribute to the cultural and spiritual transformation that is needed to address global issues of sustainability. We also raise the moral voice regarding injustice and the exploitation of peoples. Another point was that faith-based organizations can work globally with one another beyond political boundaries in a vast and strong network system that allows for successful implementation of programs and action. Another point was that faith communities are unique and can be very helpful by offering frames and perspectives, both on morality and amorality of laws and high-level decisions, and towards redefining economic success and addressing consumption. We might note that consumption is a particularly difficult issue for North America, and it's going to take a particularly moral focus to address that issue more successfully. We also note that faiths offer relationship with spirit, tools of self-examination, humility, values. We value belonging and repentance as well as ritual, which can evolve to include more relatedness. And finally, the relevance of values. We had a long discussion about different values. Faith communities are much more inclined to attend to the intersection of human and ecological justice issues. one criticism perhaps of the environmental movement has been too much of a focus on only the environment. But I think faith communities have been clear that we can't disconnect both the human and the ecological ecologies and justice issues that are related to each other. Our foremost focus should be to be responsible and good stewards and healers of our planet Earth and its life-giving resources by using our faith-based values of truthfulness, nonviolence, righteousness, self-awareness, and respectfulness towards all creation. And a final comment is we are keepers of the earth, Shamrei Adamah in the Hebrew. Faith offers an alternative to the model of using the earth. So those are some of the main take-home points. If I have just a minute, and I could share my screen, I could show just a couple more images that summarize some of the responses. Is that a possibility?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. So one of the things we did in the North American Hub was to send out a survey to all of our participants ahead of time, and to ask some of these same questions and to generate a little bit of a sense of where we were going. In terms of the historical role, we had an overwhelming response. And so we've set up a couple of websites here that post the listing of events and stories and significant accomplishments from across our community. And those are going to be posted on the Faith for Nature website for everyone to be able to see. We talked about the unique role of faith-based organizations, and with the survey, we grouped these in terms of the frequency with which people reported these. And the top answer was, we are the voice of moral accountability. That's our unique role. And we have many connections with communities on the ground worldwide, and we can mobilize. And we provide the values that empower behavior change and the spiritual dimensions of sustainable development. We're trusted partners, and we can use our vast resources for good. So those are some of the key points. There were a number of other things. We educate, we reach people's hearts, we provide the big picture, we provide hope, and we can be an example as hubs of sustainability, and we bring faith and belief. So that was the unique role. And in terms of the values, this is the last piece. Just kind of an interesting to look at the weighting of some of the values that people reported. The number one value that most people mentioned was the idea of care, of stewardship, of being keepers of the earth. The next two most important values that were very frequently mentioned, the first had to do with justice, both environmental and economic. And the second is the sense that creation is a gift from God. And the only appropriate response to a gift is gratitude. So for all of us, a posture of gratitude in our daily lives is probably the right way to be living. And then the virtue of respect for all of life, for all of creation, for others, the notion of an interconnection and a harmony with nature and a community of life, a commitment to truth and integrity and hope. These are the values that round out sort of the top responses within our group. So there were more, but those were some of the key values that seem to be reinforced over and over in our discussions. So again, it was a delight. We are looking forward in the North American Hub to further conversations today. Within our discussion and breakout groups, we were smiling and saying, can't wait to talk to you tomorrow. So I hope that all of you are having similarly great conversations.